was here on the earth, but there's a lot of parts to it, so you're going to have to pay special attention. First part is that, kind of even before our story, Jesus had a bunch of men, 12 in particular, that followed around with him, and he taught them. They were called his disciples. They're the ones that became his apostles. And while he was teaching them, after a while, he gave them the authority, he gave them the power to heal people themselves. And to make it so blind people could see, even to raise people from the dead, and to cast demons out. And he sent them out 2 by 2. I don't know who were the partners. I don't know if Peter went with John or with James or any of the rest of them. But 2 by 2, he sent them out to all the villages. And they went around and they could go into a village and begin to teach and preach all the things they had learned from Jesus. And they were able to, with Jesus' power, cast out demons, heal sick people, raise the dead, heal people that were lame and couldn't walk. They were able to do almost everything that Jesus could do. Jesus gave them that power. Well, after a while, they came back from their trip to all the different cities, came back to Jesus. And then, so you got to know that. So the disciples had the power to heal people and cast demons out. That's one thing. Got to remember that. Then, does anybody remember 2-3 weeks ago, Jesus went up on a mountain, and the glory that he had when he was in heaven shone out through his clothes when he was there on the mountain. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. You weren't here to hear that. I don't know if anybody's here that heard that. But anyway, one time Jesus went up on a mountain, and all the glory that he has now in heaven, that shone through his clothes and everything. He looked like a heavenly being, not like a man like he normally did when he was here on the earth. And there was 3 disciples that were with him. Not all the disciples were there. Is anybody remembering this yet? Yeah. There was 3 disciples that were with him. No, I think there's some people here that probably know the story, but they weren't here. So there was 3 disciples that were with him, and that was Peter, James, and John. They were the ones that were with Jesus, and they fell asleep, and they woke up, and they saw this, and then Moses and Elijah were there with them, and they started to leave, and Peter said, "Oh, it's a good thing we're here," and all of this stuff, and then the cloud of God came down and said, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." Well, while all of that was taking place, how many other disciples were there? See how good we are at math. How many other disciples were there? Jackson? No. There was 3 with Jesus, Peter, James, and John. So how many other disciples were there? Genesis? 9. There was 9 other disciples. And what do you think they were doing? We don't know exactly what they were doing, but they were not up on the mountain with Jesus. They were down in the town or whatever. And while they were down in the town, a man came to them and said, "Will you please heal my son? He has a devil." And the devil at certain times takes control of him and throws him down on the ground, and just foam comes out of his mouth. And if we're walking by the water, the devil might just take over him and throw him into the water and try to drown him, or throw him into the fire. And he can't hear, and he can't talk. It's awful. Can you please cast the demon out of my son? Now, should the disciples have been able to cast the demon out of his son? Yeah, they should, because they had done it before, right? And I don't know for sure. The Bible does not say. The Bible does tell us the story, but it doesn't tell us what the disciples did. I don't know, maybe one of them came up and said, "Oh, I've done this before," right? "I've done this before," and they said something, but nothing happened. The boy was still filled with the devil. He still couldn't hear and couldn't talk. Maybe one of the other ones said, "Oh, you did it wrong." I don't know, but maybe he said that. And he said something, and nothing happened. pretty soon, some of the Pharisees and the rulers came around and said, oh, you guys are following Jesus, but you can't do the things that Jesus... And they were starting to make fun and mock and argue about things. All this was happening while Jesus was up with Peter, James, and John. And as Jesus came back down, he saw all this huge crowd of people doing things and arguing back and forth. And Jesus said, what is going on? What are you arguing about? And this man came to Jesus and he said, please, can you deliver my son from this demon? This devil gets into him and he throws him into the water and all of this stuff. And I brought him to your disciples and they couldn't do it. Oh, and Jesus said, oh, what a faithless generation there is right now. Bring the boy to me. And as they were bringing the boy to Jesus, the devil threw him down on the ground, and I don't know, he might have looked like he was having an epileptic fit. Anybody seen anyone with epilepsy? Okay, like they lose control of themselves? That's kind of what it looked like, but people that have epilepsy are not filled with demons. They have a sickness. But sometimes it looked that way with this boy. He was just uncontrollable, and Jesus said to the father, how long has it been since he's been this way? And the dad said, since he was a young boy. If you can do anything, please help me. Now, was he going to the right person now? Yeah. Now, the disciples should have been able to help him, right? But they didn't. They couldn't. But Jesus said, well, I can do anything if you will believe. And the man said, I do believe. Help my unbelief. And Jesus told the demon, says, leave that man, leave that boy, and never come back to him again. And right that moment, the boy started thrashing all over the place, and finally he just was so calm and still that the people watching thought, he's dead. He died. But Jesus went over and touched the boy and lifted him up, and he wasn't dead. You think Jesus would let that boy die right in front of him? No. You think Jesus is more stronger, more powerful? You think Jesus is stronger than a demon? Oh yeah. That demon obeyed Jesus, but on his way out, he tried to mess things up. But Jesus wouldn't let him do that. And so the boy stood, and he was completely healed. Now, everybody was happy, and the dad and his son went home. But later on, Jesus was with the disciples. And what do you think the disciples said to Jesus? Let's see here. What do you think the disciples said to Jesus?
They probably said, we fixed him.
We fixed him. Okay. Jesus fixed him, right? What do you think the disciples said? Don't think anything right now? Okay, not anymore. Genesis, what do you think the disciples said? I'm sorry? Sorry. What would they say sorry for?
Because they weren't able to.
They weren't able to. Now, they might have said that, but the Bible tells us that they said something different, too. What do you think the disciples said to Jesus?
Sorry, I couldn't.
They might have said that to the dad. Sorry, we can't heal him. We don't know. Normally we can, but we can't. But what did they say? What do you think they said to Jesus? They got back, away from this. It was all over. They said something to Jesus. Thank you. I bet the dad said thank you to Jesus, right? So I'm going to tell you. Because they came to Jesus and said, why couldn't we cast the demon out? Why couldn't we make the demon leave? We've been able to make other demons leave. Why couldn't we make this demon leave? And Jesus said, well, he had already said. He said they didn't have faith. But he said, if you have just a little bit of faith, you can do great things. But he also said, you have to pray, you have to be praying, and he even said fasting in order for this kind of demon. He must have been a mean demon. I don't know. But here's the biggest thing. He told them they didn't have faith. They didn't have faith. Remember when he came up and said, what a faithless generation? So, I think that means that, remember how I kind of said, they said, oh, I remember how to do this. And they tried to cast the devil out. They tried to make that demon leave. And who were they trusting? Who were they trusting? When they walked up there and said, oh, I know how to do this. Who were they trusting? Genesis? Themselves, right? Before, when Jesus sent them out, they were like, okay, we can do this, but only because Jesus told us to. By this time, they were like, oh, I've done this before. I think that's the only thing I can figure, because Jesus said they didn't have faith. What is faith? Faith is believing Jesus, depending on Him. They were dependent on themselves. So, that is kind of connected. It's a little different than our verse, but it's all connected together because it's from the Bible. So, our verse says, submit yourselves therefore to God. What does that mean? You have to do what God says. What if it doesn't make sense to do what God says? What if we're like, I don't know if I want to do what God says. What does it take to submit yourself to God? It takes believing Him, obeying Him, trusting Him. It takes faith, right? It takes faith to submit yourself to God. And when you have faith, you believe Him, you trust Him, you submit yourself to God, then you will be able to resist the devil. But if you're going around doing it your own way, oh, I can do this, I don't need God's help. Are you going to be able to resist the devil if you're like, I can do it all by myself? You're not going to be able to. And then you'll end up doing things that you never thought you'd do. You end up doing things that make you very sad. And some people in the world even can't even control themselves. The devil's control them. That's really, it's awful. But we don't have to be that way. What we need to do, we don't need to be afraid even of that at all, as long as we are doing what's in our verse. Submit yourselves therefore to God. Obey God. Believe that. Remember, you know how I try to say, read, understand, and obey the Bible? If you read the Bible and you see it says, this is a simple one, children, obey your parents. Does everybody understand that? Children, obey your parents. Okay? So if we read it and we understand it, what do we have to do? Obey it, right? We read the Bible says, thou shalt not steal. Does everybody understand that?
Yeah.
Don't steal. Right. So, there's a lot of things in the Bible, but if we will read it, understand it, and some things are harder in the Bible to understand, so we should work to understand, but a lot of things easy to understand, and do it, then that would be doing what? That would be having faith, trusting God, submitting ourselves to God. When we submit ourselves to God, we can resist the devil. And the Bible says when we resist the devil, he does what? Flee. We might say he runs away. He leaves. Now he'll come back. He'll like, I got a better idea, and he'll come back to us. And as long as we are submitting ourselves to God and we resist him, he will flee. We obey God. He will flee. He will run away. And he'll run away, and then he'll get another idea, and he'll come back. The devil's not ever going to leave us alone. He's not ever going to leave us alone forever until we get to heaven and God puts him in hell. But, okay, so what do we remember from today's lesson? We have to have faith, not be like the disciples. Faith means obeying God. Faith means submitting ourselves to God and then resisting the devil so that he will run away